Hey, Steve.
Hey, how we doing?
Yeah, doing well, man. Nice to see you.
You too?
I appreciate you coming on this webinar today. It's funny, I was watching this as I was coming back down to turn my camera on. I realized my video froze at probably the most poetic time of that video. Stop wasting your time on lost leads, right? It's kind of funny just to see kind of where that paused. But well, hey, since it's 11 o'clock, I know people are going to be kind of coming through the doors here over the next minute or two. So I'll just take a chance here to just kind of introduce or reintroduce, if you will, the webinar series that we're in. As everybody knows, we started this webinar a few weeks ago, specifically tailored to helping remodeling companies like my own kind of just maximize their potential, maximizing it by perfecting things in various parts of their company. We kicked off the series with Kyle Hunt with a focus on just mastering your numbers, knowing KPIs and metrics to track, and just ultimately being a better business person overall, better business owner. And then last week, we were on with Bruce Case, who had a lot of insightful suggestions on how to build a really good design build sales mechanism, right? So a lot of good documentation stuff that we talked about then. And then here with today, Steve, who I'll have you introduce yourself here in a minute. Steve and I were introduced through a couple of friends of mine and who have used, precision sales consulting for their own company and said, hey, you got to check these guys out. And certainly from our initial conversation way back, Steve, I think we hit it off and you're extremely knowledgeable in this area. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to kind of just hop on this webinar and kind of do this kind of free Q&A type of conversation with a lot of people that I know that I've met through the remodeling community and answer some kind of pressing questions that certainly I have for my own remodeling company, but hopefully some of my questions kind of seep into answering some questions that might come out of the group. So just again, a reminder for everybody, this is a live Q&A. So if you have a question that comes up based on the conversation that you're hearing, or any other burning questions that may not have anything to do with what we just said, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. We'll see them in real time and we'll try to respond as many as we can through the duration of today's webinar. So with that being said, I'll at least let Steve introduce himself. So Steve, tell everybody why you have the microphone today.
Well, first of all, AJ, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your crowd. Why do I have the microphone today? Well, I've had the great misfortune or the great opportunity to be in sales for a long time. I started out in SaaS sales for 20 plus years as a rep and as a sales leader. So for better for worse, I know of which I speak, I think, in a lot of ways. Started working with Precision Sales Consulting last year, working with my partner Nemo over there. So I think hopefully I will be able to tackle most of the things that come up today. I'm certainly not a home remodeling expert, but we do work with a lot of companies like yours as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Just from our initial conversation, although it may not be hyper focused on the home improvement industry, certainly your approach to sales and just the in-depth sales knowledge you have, even though across a bunch of industries in more horizontal fashion, I think uh, a lot of your knowledge definitely ties into our space just as well. So we're going to get into some of those topics here in a second. Just reminder for anybody, I think most of the people on this call know who I am, but for those who end up watching this on YouTube, I stumbled across this video in a couple of years from now. I own a remodeling company called Cornerstone Remodeling in Ellicott City, Maryland. We have scaled this up. I started the company in 2011. We've scaled up. And really, my crowning achievement has been the ability to step away from the business and kind of watch it thrive without my direct involvement in most cases. I've gotten my hours down to maybe 2 or 3 a week. And due to that, I've been able to pursue launching another company called Render, who is the reason why we're talking today. Is Render is actually putting on these webinars because we have a software solution for home improvement companies. I won't get into it too deeply today, but it is actually a sales acceleration tool helping us sell faster, close deals faster, and a lot of streamlined workflows through that help us get a lot of those manual entry processes more digitized and streamlined. But yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to park on this slide here. It's going to kind of just give us an indication of where we are in the conversation. But I'm just going to kick it off with a question here, which, start of the sales process. Sales starts with pricing, right? So we have to have something to sell. So we have demand gen, we have leads that come in the door, whether through referrals or through online marketing, just brand awareness, our presence in the space. We get a customer that comes to us and says we want to buy a particular product that we hear that you sell or a service that you sell. We then, as contractors, have to come up with a price for that particular service and then sell it to our homeowner. So one of the first questions I'm going to ask, just to kind of kick us off, is how can contractors confidently come up with a price and then confidently sell that to a customer? I'll add some context around this. I think there are people on this call that either sell, I say, for a fee or for free. So whether you're selling projects for an initial fee, a design agreement, or you're selling, you're maybe perhaps estimating and designing for free and then selling a build contract, in one way or another, we're still estimating a cost for our services and selling a particular contract for those services, right? So for those of us who are just selling design agreements, we're trying to come up with a price that we can justify selling this design agreement for, and then confidently telling the customer, like, yes, it's worth it. Like, how do you build that confidence with your buyer to sell them something that, for a design agreement, maybe does not pack as much of a punch, right?
Yeah, the design agreement especially. I mean, I always look at pricing, and again, I am not an expert in your business, but I think you have to premium price, especially on the things that your clients derive the most value from, right? That's where everything cascades down from. So we have a saying, competence plus confidence equals conviction, meaning if you've had enough at bats, if you've had some experience with, let's say, you start the design agreement process and you know that kitchens are your specialty. You know that your customers, you have a lot of social proof that they get a ton of value out of the kitchen remodeling that you do. That's probably going to be your premium priced item, and that's going to be the thing that maybe gets you into other projects. So I don't pretend to understand the margins or how others price in this particular industry, but you really have to start there, in my opinion, of the thing that really you can stake your claim on, whatever it is that your customers tell you again and again. And again, I would listen to your customers, not, hey, I think we do a really good job on bathrooms, and then you find out, hey, most of the people are praising us for our kitchen work, right? Your customers know. And if you're getting the positive feedback and the social proof on a particular line of work that you do, price that, start there, and then price down from there, because you probably want to enter other parts of the house. You probably want to start doing bathrooms if you're a kitchen specialist. You can probably price a little bit less there to get that work and build up that social proof.
So I think the social proof is an important concept to master because that coupled with competitive analysis, right? So social proof, obviously, if people, and this is one exercise we did at Cornerstone when we were coming up with our design agreement pricing, was, what are people actually after? Why do they seek us out? And for us, it definitely was for our hand holding white glove design experience. So right there, that told us, okay, there's value here, and value is what we can sell, right? If there's no value in the product or the service, people are not going to pay for it. It's certainly not going to pay what we really want to be asking for. So our time to put together estimates, even though we may dump 3 hours into building an estimate and 3 hours into building a design, people will pay for the 3 hours of the design. They're not necessarily going to pay for the 3 hours that we're putting into the estimate. So that's kind of like a loss leader for us. So what we had to do was we basically went through and we said, okay, if a lot of the values in the design, we need to gatekeep that. Let's get people enough information up front for them to get into the door. So what we do is we do a discovery call where we'll come up with comfort zone pricing with them, or like ballparks, just price ranges to kind of help them understand that for what you're looking for from our company, it's going to cost you between X and Y, $150,000 to $200,000. And as long as we can agree that that's a way forward, we say, okay, well, what you're really after right now is the concept, the designs. you're going to have to pay for that. Like we gave you what you were after, to at least qualify this conversation. We know that you're after the designs. We've time and time again have had people that have, excuse me, have sought after our company for our design work and have shopped it around other remodelers. So at this point, we can't prevent them from doing that, but we can certainly charge for doing our designs. And we basically came up with a price. We said, okay, well, if a lot of the values in the design, the values in like the 3D design. So we said, okay, well, if we just produce a 2D floor plan, there's not a whole lot of value even there. There may be some. So we kind of started to pack in. Would someone pay $100 for us to go out for a consultation? Maybe. Would they pay us $500 if that consultation were coupled with a floor plan? Maybe. But if we were to pack in a full suite of 3D designs, a comprehensive estimate proposal that lists all their allowances, would they pay 1,000? Would they pay 2,000? Would they pay $3,000 for that? Once we start to pack in more value, you start to understand where your metrics work, right? So if your metrics don't work with $100 for appointment, you need to be making at least say $1,000 for getting to a certain point, and then you can start to figure out what to backfill and increase the value of that design agreement. For those who are not doing design agreements, if you don't have a design mechanism in your company, don't sweat it. It's a great model, the design build model. I think Bruce Case elaborated a lot of that last week. But if you do have designers on staff or you do design yourself and you're selling design services, moving in that direction of selling a design agreement as your first contract is definitely the way to go. So if you have any questions on how to get started with that, happy to have a follow-up. I don't want to dive too much into the whole design agreement thing today, but definitely a lot of meat there. But when you say social proof, Steve, elaborate on that a little bit. So social proof, like, and I did mention competitive analysis too. How
Mhm.
does that all play together? Like if I find out what my competitors are charging for a certain thing, if I have a better service, I've got the social proof and maybe perhaps they don't. Like how does the competitive analysis kind of play into coming up with good pricing for our services?
I think there's a few things. One is you want to be confident in the strata in which you're playing. If you're a premium price service and you're going after business that premium price providers are going after, obviously you want to understand their pricing as best you can. And a lot of times customers are going to share that information with you. I think what's more important is the work that you do. And I use this term social proof, a lot of people use it. It's the idea that if you go to my website or you see something that I leave behind for you, there's something on there that indicates, hey, these guys are credible. They've done good work in the past. In fact, maybe they've done work in my neighborhood. So you can engineer the social proof any way you want. Say you go into a particular neighborhood and you've done work in and around that neighborhood, make sure that you can get a person that will give you a testimonial or that it doesn't mind having a conversation with somebody in the neighborhood. That's one form. Another form, obviously, in today's world, everything's driven by Google. If I go to Google and I Google Cornerstone, what I'm going to see are a lot of high quality reviews, and that gives me, a good indication that I can feel comfortable interviewing Cornerstone for the work that I have. The other thing is my website should be credible. I should have video, hopefully with customer testimonials or just a customer reel. Anything that makes people think in this competitive environment, hey, you know what? These guys look credible. These guys do
Yeah.
work in my neighborhood. These guys do the kind of work that I'm seeking. I feel very good about reaching out and setting up an appointment with them. That's what I mean by social.
And that's actually a really good plug for next week's webinar, where we're going to talk specifically about, maximizing your content, your visibility online with video, testimonials, reviews, things like that.
Yep.
So kind of moving into like handling the sales motion, if you will. Um, I have in here like sales expectations. So for me, what would be the primary things for me to pay attention to when I'm talking with my sales team? Hey, we can't lose on uh, these three things, one, two, and three. What are those? And I'm not going to hold you to three, but what are the most important things for me to kind of hold to? One of these things should be response rate, right? Response time. But are there other things that we really need to be hyper focused on, like nailing, getting right when we're talking
Yeah.
about like lead management and upfront stuff?
Yeah, a couple of things. You mentioned it, time, speed to lead, right? I just read a thing online the other day about a guy on LinkedIn who's kind of a sales expert, and he went into a company and realized, wow, their average time to respond to a lead is 72 hours. If you're going to wait 72 hours, you've probably been upstaged by 5 or 6 companies, right? So when you get a lead, you have to have a system that allows that lead to be touched right away. And when I say right away, I mean within minutes, if not within an hour. So that's the first thing. The first person to the opportunity often is the one who wins that opportunity. The second thing is you have to have a system for evaluating those leads, right? For, do I even want to take this on? Does this look like an opportunity that we can, one, do very well and have a satisfied customer? There's always going to be opportunities where you're going to want to do some stretch jobs and some work that maybe you haven't done before to kind of grow your profile in other areas. But you want to be pretty certain that it's going to be a great outcome for the customer before you take on the work, for the most part. And then the other thing is really, are your salespeople equipped to, I don't like to use the word pitch because it's not a pitch, but are they equipped to sort of say, hey, here's what our customers tell us they like about working with us. And it is those 2 or 3 things. It's probably 3 things. You know, we get the job done on time and on budget. We're very professional in the work that we do. And we'll tell you if, hey, you know what, we can't do this piece right here, but we recommend these other folks here. Whatever the 3 things are that you're really good at, that your customers say over and over again, don't be the one as the sales rep who's saying, we can do this, we can do that, we can do the other thing. Here's what our customers say, right? That's what's really powerful. You're not the one who's sort of kind of pumping up your own tires. You're letting other people do it.
So what you're saying is like change the context. So instead of me telling you how great I am, I'm just relaying information about what other people have said about my company, or that, hey, other people use us because of these things. We hear this time and time again that, if I'm here to pitch you a design agreement, right? We just had a conversation, a lovely conversation about budget. And Steve, you just told me that you want to spend $250,000. I don't know what's going on with my throat today. You just told me that you want to spend $250,000. And I say, okay, great. Hey, look, the next steps here are really to talk about our design agreement. Then moving forward here, we're gonna talk about the next steps for us. We're gonna put our best foot forward, like give you a proposal and give you a design agreement that will allow our team to kind of pull off what our other customers say is probably the most fun thing about this entire experience is like getting these designs, these concepts. We're going to put our best foot forward on that. Based on your budget, we're going to have a lot of fun with this. What we what we've done with other customers in the past, and the things that they love is that when they get these 3 designs back, and we can show them, kind of what options are available to them. Like we're pulling other customers, the other experiences, kind of into that conversation. How else can I, enhance that conversation, right? What else can I be bringing into that might add more value?
Well, I think there's a few things. One is what you just said about sort of setting the expectations for the interaction, right? So now you've got the lead, you've contacted the lead, and you're actually having a conversation. You're kind of telling them every step of the way. You're giving them a chance to opt in or opt out. You're not pitching one way of here's all the stuff that's going to happen. It's if then, if this, then that, right? So you're giving them a chance. You're taking them down the lane, and they might decide, you know what? Hey, I just wanted this quick and dirty project. I don't really want to go through this whole process. Then you can decide, hey, is that really a good opportunity for me for a cornerstone? Maybe, maybe not. But I think the whole thing about sales is that we've been taught in the media sort of, if you think about the classic portrayals of sales, it's very one way, very convincing, very domineering. Whereas, in today's world, you know what? Just be a human, kind of tap into the things that they're looking to do. Is there anything more personal than sitting in someone's house and having them tell you their hopes and dreams for the interior of their house and what they're hoping it's going to look like? If you're that person that's able to elicit that, we call that pain. It doesn't hurt necessarily, but it's the gap between where they are now and where they're trying to get to. If you're the person that elicits that, they're probably going to go with you. And so it's less about what you're doing and more about the time and space you're allowing them to do the thing, which is to explore the thing that they want to do and figure out, are you the right service to provide it?
Is there a standard way for you, like when you're coaching individuals on, kind of perfecting their sales process? Is there a standard um, operational mechanism in place that kind of helps us find that pain faster so that we can be very responsive. Obviously, these conversations are happening kind of in real time, right? So, is there a way that we can kind of tap into that pain, like questions, like pinpointed questions or topics that we can get into to uncover that quickly so that we can be the guys that are answering that pain with some suggestions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I should say we use the Sandler selling system as kind of the sheet music for everything we do. So we follow that system, and one step in that system is the pain step. And in that system, you sort of already qualified, hey, we're in the right place. People are in the right place. We can do the work that they want. The budget is there. The time frame sort of aligns. Now let's really find out, like, what are they trying to accomplish? And what you're hoping to accomplish is to, again, elicit that feeling, especially in the home sales, home remodeling, like, again, very personal choice that they're making. Let them feel that a little bit. And there is this technique of, we call it reversing, and I won't get too far into it, but it's when you ask a question, and they give you an answer, you question the answer again, because usually the first thing that they say is very rarely that kind of deeper emotion that you're trying to elicit. It's kind of a surface answer. It's kind of like, hey, so why did you bring us in here today? I know you're looking to do something with your kitchen. Tell us about it. Well, we obviously need a much bigger island and our cabinets are really bothering us. Really? Tell me a little bit more about that. Start with the cabinets. Well, honestly, our neighbor just got these really beautiful cabinets, and I realized ours are so dated. These are like 1980s cabinetry, and I just can't really look at it anymore. And the island, as you can see, we we made a poor choice with the materials. This is definitely 1980s looking, faux marble here on the top. And honestly, we just want something that's a little more timeless, that fits in more with the theme of the house. And we just feel, again, they're going deep. You haven't really said much other than question the first answer that they gave you, giving them the time and space to tell you what they're really feeling and why they really want to do this project. It's rarely, I need a new kitchen. There is always a story behind that. And it is your job as a salesperson to let them tell you that story. And the way to do
Yeah.
it is asking good questions.
Do you feel that a lot of salespeople, and we say, I'm going to use that term very loosely today because I've never put myself in that category. I'm not a salesperson, but ultimately, as a business owner and someone who was like leading sales for my organization for the first decade, I was the only salesperson. But do you feel like salespeople can make the fault of talking too much during that consultation? Should we be doing more listening than talking, providing solutions?
Wow, you're really leading the witness here, AJ. I love it.
I don't know.
Um,
I'm
yeah,
asking honestly because
yeah, no,
I think there are two schools of thought there, right? Because you want to be able to be the one who's providing solutions kind of on the spot, blowing people's minds with your hey, I heard you. I like asking the question to kind of allow them to explore a little bit more in depth what they had said, like that. I feel like that validates the fact that you're listening to them by asking the question, but then the follow up, should we be like really getting into the weeds with them on these initial sales consultations, or really should we be doing more listening and like how much empathy are we putting into this conversation?
empathy is key. I mean, I think just from a Sandler perspective, I can tell you what we call the fulfillment, which is the presentation, comes in the middle towards the late end of the process, right? So you're doing all this establishing to figure out, hey, are we all in the right place? Meaning, does our budget align here? Is the project fit to what we do and do well? Are all these other factors sort of at play? Like, do we feel good that you know they're in a state of their process where they're actually going to do something, or are we just kicking tires? Again, there's a lot that goes into that. But when you get to the paint step and you figure out, okay, they really do want to do something based on what they've told us, and we're the ones that sort of elicited that, there's a reason that God gave us two ears and one mouth. And I know people have heard people say that, but it is so true. You're actually aiming to do 20% of the talking. And it's really okay to wait to do all the features and benefits stuff, because there's a place for that. And there's a place for that after you've established rapport, after you've done some qualification, and after you've elicited some pain. Hey, does it make sense for us to tell you a little bit about how we might go about this project? Are we
I
at
like
that
that.
place? And then it's, oh God, yeah, I'd really like you to tell me, how are you going to get rid of all my dated cabinetry and my terrible island? And it's asking questions. And I want to give some examples, but it's like, hey, if we're at that point, let me ask you, if you could wave a magic wand, can you describe to me, and even close your eyes, what would it look like? What would it sound like in here? How would it feel? Can you take me through? I know you've been thinking about this a while. Can you take me through that? Or if you could come in here and do anything you wanted to it, and there was one thing that was really bugging you, what is that one thing? Right? There's so many ways to get people to just go, oh, forgot, and I need to tell you this, and I need to tell you that. By the time you're leaving and you've already set up the second appointment, they're coming after you. Go, I forgot to tell you this part. I forgot to tell you that part because you've
We
earned
get
the
that all
right.
the time.
Yeah, because you know why? You've earned that trust in a short period of time. You've established like you're a human being. Your company has done good work. You've come in and listened to what they want to do, and you've said, hey, you know what? I think we can help you. What do you
Yeah,
say we come back with, a design for you? We'll go from there, but here's what the process loosely looks like from here. It aligns to your timeline in this way. You're just from there, you're just setting the expectations and taking them through your process that probably you do today. There's just a lot more work on the upfront. And the reason that you're doing that is because not everybody's a prospect for you. Maybe everybody that you talk to is eventually going to do a project, but they're probably not right for you. And you as a business owner have to decide what are the things that look like projects we want to do and we can do well, and what are the things that we're like, yeah, that's not a great fit, but I do it because they really want to do it and they're going to do it quickly and they pay for it.
right. Yeah, I think a lot of these initial contacts that we have with our customers need to be exploration on both sides. Obviously, the customer, the homeowner, is exploring this with us to figure out, okay, can they do this, and are they going to be, too expensive or just right? We're also in return doing some exploration, like, is this a project we want to take on? Is this a customer that we feel like we're going to mutually? Is this a customer that we're actually going to like? Are we getting any red flags earlier on? So definitely exploring early on. And I feel like there's going to be a good conversation we're going to have about documentation because a lot of those initial calls, and honestly through the process, when we talk about documenting, like scripting the conversation, not reading off of a script when we're talking to someone, but having a script running in the back of our head, like, okay, check that, check that, check that. Now I need to talk about these things, right? I need to get information so that I can check this box. We're going to talk about documentation here in a bit because I know that that's something that's very helpful. Something that we're building out with our own team at Cornerstone is documenting how we have those initial conversations. When you leave the conversation, you need to be able to answer these three things, right? And for the next one, and for the next one, and for the next one. But kind of getting into like we're okay. So initial conversation has been had.
Mhm.
Uh, say things have been presented or not. One of the questions that I had was how pesky should we be as salespeople? Like, I've always been more passive in my approach to sales, not very like knocking on doors and going door to door to cold outreach. It's never been my scene. I'm very passive when it comes to this. So I automatically feel like, oh, I don't want to bother them today with like calling. Maybe I'll do it like in 3 days from now. Is there a rule of thumb for us to like abide by certain guidelines for maybe don't call too much or don't email them too much? Like, what should I tell my team?
I think there's a couple ways to look at it. One is if you've gotten a lead off of your website, and again, speed is important. I would say exhaust the contact until you actually get somebody on the phone or a response via email, because there's just a short period of time to capitalize on that. And because they've reached out to you, every interaction that you're trying to have with them should be, thank you for reaching out to us. When would you like to schedule a conversation about your kitchen project or your bathroom remodeling? And that is email, that's text more and more. I can tell you, I text with people all the time to set up interactions, to set up Zoom calls or set up meetings. Or is that in person, right? Hey, look, we're really happy that you reached out to us. Let's set up a time that we can actually sit down and go through what it is you're trying to accomplish. You're just setting up that empathy up front, being a human, be somebody they want to talk to. Because I think it's really easy to, like, you mentioned scripts. We don't talk about scripts. What we talk about is kind of choose your own adventure. It's if this happens, then we do that, right? So kind of concepts or talk track concepts of, hey, if they say this, then I know that I can say that. But before that, you sort of need to decide as a business owner, like, what are the things that we need to get out of that first meeting to feel good about putting time, effort, and resources into design or a next interaction or whatever it is that our process dictates about delivery, right? Because as you alluded to, it costs you money to do that. So if I feel like this is a good prospect based on the KPIs or the criteria that I have of the type of clients we want to work with, if the time period that they're looking to do something in aligns with the needs of our business, hey, if I'm already straight out and I can't take this project for another couple of months and they're looking to do it today, do I really want to even entertain that?
Yeah.
And the other thing is you have to make it okay up front for them to say, you know what, you guys aren't the fit for us, or make it okay for you to tell them that. And that's just calling it out up front. If you feel it, it's okay to call it out in a nice way.
So, so I like what you said, with it's like, hey, thanks for reaching out, like as the precursor to what I'm about to say next. Thanks for reaching out. I would love to, kind of pin you down for an appointment or whatever. Thanks for reaching out. Is that the nice way of saying, hey, you asked for this?
That's
So, like, if we're really being honest, like for the first, so for when they reach out, like, to schedule an appointment or to get that initial the contact made, we really should be, like you said, exhausting every resource, phone, email, text, especially for the first couple of days. And once we actually start presenting materials to them, is there a rule of thumb, like uh, if we submitted a design agreement,
Mhm.
would there should there be, I guess, when we send over just, hey, here's your design agreement. This is kind of what we promised we were going to deliver to you. Is one of the tricks here that I've been used to is like setting the expectation in that email to say, if I don't hear back from you in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, 72, I will follow up in a few days if I haven't heard back. Like, should we be setting those expectations
Mhm.
in that initial delivery, in those communications for the next communication if we don't hear back?
That's an excellent start. What I think is even better is to agree with the customer, potential customer, on how they like to be contacted and when. Hey, look, I know we've got this second meeting scheduled to do the design, run through the design, but if life intercedes and we can't get in touch with you, like, what's the best way for us to come back together? Like, how do you like me to reach out to you? And how often? I don't want to be a sales mosquito, right? Where you're slapping at me. I just want to make sure that we get to that design build and you feel good about moving forward, right? So yes, you can have your own sort of, yes, I'm going to contact you in 24 or 48 hours, and I think that's really good. But it's also, if you set that expectation with the customer, then it's like they've given you carte blanche to follow up in the way that you've agreed, right? Well,
They've
I'm really
opted in,
busy.
right?
Yeah, they've opted in. So, text is the best way to get me. Okay, great. I'll text you if for whatever reason, we haven't confirmed the meeting 2 days in advance. I'll just text you and we'll work it out. How does that sound? Hey, that's great.
Smart. If my team is on this webinar, I'm looking. Yes, they are. Note that one. That's a good one. So one of the things here is objection management. So we're presenting materials and handling these objections. Do you have any healthy objection management techniques for salespeople? I'll leave that comment there. I know it's a very wide spectrum of a question there, but any healthy objection management techniques that we can just know about?
Yeah, leave Jed, your friend Jed, at the door. Jed is justify, explain, and defend. Don't find yourself in a position where you're backpedaling and you're saying, well, we've done a few bathrooms, we can definitely do yours. Really, what you want to understand is, like, why did you ask that question just now? Hey, how much experience do you have doing bathrooms? I'm interested why you asked that question. We don't get it much. We do plenty of design work on bathrooms and kitchens. And then you find out they've heard from somebody else that you guys don't do a lot of bathrooms, right? They've heard from, a competitor, whatever it is. All you're doing is we call that reversing. I mentioned it before. You're reversing it back to them. Hey, that's an interesting question. Why did you ask that just now? Um, and then they tell you, well, the other guys that were here, they mentioned you guys don't do a lot of bathroom work. Oh, well, actually, bring in my social proof. Here's what my customers say. Here's some great pictures, right? It opens up the floor a little bit to bring in some of the stuff that you do want to show them and you do want to talk about the work that you do. So when they open the door, it's fair game to then start talking about those things, the actual deliverable that you can bring. I'm glad you asked, because let's talk about that bathroom that you want to do.
I like that. I like that. So when we are getting to the conversation where like there's an obvious next step that we really want to push and take. This question is going to be twofold. Is one is how do we set the expectation that we really want to move forward and we really want to kind of put them in the position of like setting up, like how important is it setting up that next appointment while we're in the existing appointment? And two, is there any way that we can get customers moving faster? Probably one of the pain points for everybody on this call is the sales cycle in the remodeling industry right now is lengthening. It's elongating. It's excruciating that people are dragging their feet. It's just kind of the way the economics are right now. So, are there any ways that we can kind of encourage people to move faster or push them to move faster, or are we just at their? Are we working on their timetable?
The easy answer is you're working on their timetable. And you want to, again, you want to establish that up front, but you also got to know, like, again, I mentioned life intercedes. Like something happens, somebody at the house gets injured. My daughter just wrenched her knee playing lacrosse. Like we've thrown everything to the wayside. Like if I was doing a design project right now, that would be the last thing on my mind, right? And I think you got to call that out. Hey, look, stuff happens, but it sounds like you really want to get started on this project in 60 days. To do that, here's what we've got to do. Here's what that process looks like from here. Does it make sense that we can get back together next week to go through the design part and make sure you're satisfied with it? Because there's some tweaking from there. And then here are the other things that need to happen. All you can do is use what they've told you as your guideline and try to keep them on that timeline. You can't make one up that works well for you. What you can do, obviously, is remind them, hey, look, we buy materials on a schedule. We have to pull people off of other jobs, whatever it is. Like if we're committing to doing these things to expedite your timeline, can we be assured that we're going to kind of stick to that timeline? And again, that's setting and resetting expectations because the thing they told you at the first meeting has probably changed 3 or 4 times since then. So it's asking the same questions over and over again in a nice way, in a slightly different way, but calling back to, hey, here's what you told me, right? Are we still on that path? I just want to make sure, it feels like maybe we're slipping a little bit, and that's okay. But could we reestablish like the end game timeline for you? Because it feels like we're moving off of that a little. So
Maybe
don't
holding them
don't
accountable a little bit.
there is some accountability there. And look, eh, we're all people here. We know stuff happens, and it's okay to just acknowledge, hey, look, everybody's busy. Everybody's got a lot going on. I just want to make sure that we're sticking to your timeline and we're holding up our end of the bargain. Feels like things are slipping a little bit. Can we recalibrate on the delivery a little bit? Because it
Sure.
feels like maybe we need to do that.
So what I'm hearing is that there's not really a good way to kind of like move them faster, but there is a good way to keep them on target and maybe massage that and keep them aligned with, okay, hey, look, we did say early on that we were planning on a start in August. We're sensing that's becoming maybe jeopardized a little bit by the length of time that it's taken us to get this far. Do we want to try to get that back on track? And maybe again, asking for that opt-in, right?
That's it.
Um, but as long as we're doing our jobs as well, right? Setting uh, one of the questions that I had was how important is it to get that next step established on your current one? You're in a meeting, and the desired outcome from this meeting is to set up a contract meeting, like a contract review meeting. How important is it to get it on the books while you have them in front of you?
I mean, I think it's hugely important, right? That when you have the opportunity to get in front of somebody, especially they invite you into your home, you've had a good conversation. I think that's one thing. If somebody says, "Hey, look, we'll let you know, we're going to think it over, or we're going to talk to some other people." Hey, that's all great. Usually, when people say that, it probably means that I should just kind of leave you alone and let you come to your own decision, and then you come back to me. We're just going to move on as if, we're just going to kind of move on to other customers. We'd love to work with you, but totally understand your timeline. That's what we call the pendulum, which is we're not going to try to pull them in. We're going to try to keep them sort of at bay a little bit and recognize and be respectful of, hey, we need to think it over. Hey, that's fine. It sounds like maybe there's nothing more I can do to kind of get you to that next step. You're not comfortable there. That's okay. Why don't you let us know when it's time? To me, that's qualifying and saying these guys probably aren't a good fit for us unless they take the step themselves of coming back. You can't talk somebody in to doing a review of their design that you're going to go away and do. Hopefully you're not doing that if they don't agree to the next meeting, because hey, that's great. We'll put the design on pause. And you know what? If you want to proceed to that step, you let me know. We'd love to do that for you, but totally understand, lots of options out there and you have a lot going on in your life. But here's my card. Would love to have the conversation if and when you're ready.
I like that. And I know that's again flagging that for my team who's listening. I like that a lot. So
Think about when somebody is trying to bulldoze you into something. What's the reaction that you get, right? It pushes you back. It
yeah, they're
doesn't
resistant.
it doesn't make you lean in. So if you give somebody a chance to lean in, and you do, we call this pattern interruption, right? You do the thing that all the other people don't do, right? You're not going to force them into a second meeting that they may not want to take and they're probably not going to show up for. You're going to say, hey, it kind of sounds like you're not ready for that step. Totally agree. Like, let's pause this thing. I'm going to leave the onus on you. If you want to have that design conversation, we'd love to have it. You let me know. You know what they're sitting there saying? Wow, we don't get that from anybody else. I really like that. This guy gets it. So give them a chance to opt in. Don't try to bulldoze them into a second step. Because if you think about it, how many times have you scheduled that second meeting where you've kind of felt like, wow, I got them to take that second meeting, and you knew they weren't really into it. And so they didn't show up. Or when you delivered the plans to them and you went through it, they were less than enthusiastic. And the deal ended up not going anywhere because of it. If you feel that up front, call it out. It's okay. Hey, you know what? Kind of sensing like you're not ready for that next step. Totally okay. You let me know when and if it makes sense, because we'd love to have an opportunity to come back to you and talk about the design. All you can do is sort of acknowledge the thing that you're feeling and let them make the decision. Because if you push them into a second meeting, it rarely is the thing. Hey, you know what? These guys were really pushy and they got me into this second meeting and now I really want to work with them. How often does that happen?
Probably not as often as we really want it to be, right? So when we have them in front of us, setting an expectation like, hey, the next step for us is, having another one of these meetings, whether it's face to face or online through Zoom, but establishing that to say, hey, look, we'd love to get together again. Instead of saying, hey, we're going to give you guys a week to check this out, and then we'll touch base and try to schedule another meeting. Instead, we should say, okay, hey, here's everything that we're talking about today. We want to set up another meeting to kind of review this together. Do you feel comfortable setting that appointment up now? Like, because that's the obvious next step for us. Next Monday or Tuesday, do those dates look good? So if you're
Mhm.
sensing any pushback there to like, no, we want to really look this over and kind of weigh our options. At that point, perhaps the suggestion would be recognize that as some hesitation that we probably should get in front of like right now, and then call it out. Say, hey, it's totally fine if you don't feel comfortable moving there. Like what we'll do is we'll put it on pause until we hear from you. So that way they know we're not going to be toiling over this. They know that we're not going to be like kind of scheming and spending a lot of our effort and energy on their product on their project. If they really want that, they should feel that, right? That's what you're saying, is that they really should feel like, hey, look, I don't want to, I don't leave Cornerstone in the lurch now. Like, no, let's go ahead and set up that meeting. So if we get them back in that conversation by kind of, I don't know, what pushing them back on their heels a little bit, say, okay, well, that's fine, you can leave it there, but just know we're gonna walk in this direction now.
Yeah.
That basically, I don't know, is that like playing hard to get?
Yeah, we call it, I mentioned pattern interrupt, right? But do the thing that they're not expecting you to do, which is, be empathetic, be a human, and work on their timeline and consider their feelings as part of the process, right? Hey, we're working together on this. I'm glad you had me into your home. I can't wait to dive into your vision for this. Can I just tell you how we operate and just kind of set up what might be a next step from here? And that's the upfront agreement. You're talking to them
Yeah.
about, yeah, here's what we're going to do today. You're going to have a lot of questions for me. I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. Hopefully, we'll get to a point where having another conversation makes sense. At the end of our hour, we'll just spend the next 10 minutes and we'll just talk about what does the next step look like? Because I can tell you in our world, here's what it is. So you're preparing them for that next step. You're preparing them at the end of that first meeting where you're basically going to ask them, "Hey, should we schedule a time to come back and review the plans with you?" They already know that that's what's going to happen, right? So they're more apt to be straightforward with you about, "Hey, about that. We're just not ready for that because here's what we're doing." Right? You're making it
Great.
yeah, you're making it okay for them.
Yeah, great segue actually to talk about this piece, because obviously The more the customers know up front and know the expectations of how you work and how this process works from start to finish, from they have a problem and they see a desired result to get here, this is how it will work. So they clearly defining that up front allows them to understand where they are in that process. And then reminding them, obviously, clear next step here is to move to this next part of the process. Let's talk about documenting the sales process, right? So a lot of us on this call, I know I've had conversations with a lot of people. I'm kind of scanning the attendees here. I've had a lot of conversations with folks about the process and documenting processes around the company. But when we're talking about sales process, how well should this be documented? I kind of brought up scripting earlier, and perhaps that's a good or maybe not great thing. But any tips on us, like for us to document the actual process for sales and how things should go? When we're talking SOPs, we're talking perhaps scripts or at least outlines for how conversations should go, agendas for meetings. Like, how well should that be documented for us?
Well, I would say it should be documented, right? Especially when you get to the point of, you're an owner or a founder and you're looking to kind of hand off the sales process to somebody else that you're maybe not in the business every single day. So you do want to have something to leave them. You mentioned as an owner and founder, you are for a period of time, you were sales, right? And
Yeah.
you did it your way and you weren't, you said you didn't have any training and you went out there and you made it happen. The problem with that is a lot of founders and business owners kind of move out of the business and they kind of think, well, they're just going to do it the way I did it. And there's nothing written down. It's all in your head. So you got to start planning for the day when the business is going to grow. And you also want to, the two or three people that you brought in the business to do sales, that's the perfect opportunity to start letting them sort of take some of this stuff over. And it's like, hey, look, here's what a good first interaction looks like. Here are the three or four things we're trying to establish. Here's how we're figuring out, does it make sense to keep going after this business? So you just need to start with what's going on in your business today and what's working and what does a good sales process, if you get to a good outcome, reverse engineer that thing. What are the things that you did in that sales process to make that outcome the way it was? And they were satisfied customers and they came back and they did another project with you. So start with something that really works, that works, and just start writing it down. And it doesn't have to be, a system like Sandler or Miller Hyman or any of these other great methodologies. It can be your system, but it just has to be documented to the point that if I came into the business, that I could actually follow it with some help.
And a couple of tips is, when you're thinking about documenting these things, perhaps it's not starting out as like, hey, when the first thing you do is ask this, and then you follow up with this question, and then that question. It's more of like, okay, we want to find out if this customer is what we call an ICP, ideal customer profile,
That's right.
right? We want to find out if this customer is of the type that buys remodeling projects from a company like mine. Do they need our service? Are they in our area? What kind of personality do they have? What kind of people do we want to work with? We started to dig into it and realize that our customers, we can't just like go on to Zoom info or pull lists from online of Facebook profiles of like specific individuals, right? They're more generic. Well, working families, both husband and wife are working. Not necessarily from a financial perspective for us, but it's more mindset. If they're both
Mhm.
working, neither one of them had a whole lot of time and energy to dump into figuring out a remodeling project. They want more white glove service
Yeah.
because they don't have time to think about through all these things. We get a lot of people that want to keep up with the Joneses, right? They want to have the best house in the block. We can identify once we start to identify who the ICP is, then we can start to figure out, okay, how do we figure that out fast? And then that's the thing that we want to document for somebody else to follow. Hey, look, we're really trying to figure out if they're this type of person and that type of person, because the project type, the size of the project, their budget, those things are more fixed, right? They're in our
Mhm.
area, they've got a good budget. That's like MQL status, like marketing qualified lead. We can ask that on a contact form. What we can't ask on a contact form is, hey, do both of you guys work? And do you have kids in school? And do you hate the fact that your neighbor's house looks better than yours? Those are the types of things that happen more conversationally and that we find out during the initial conversation. But unless it's documented, because that's how I would always go into an initial appointment. And like you said, as the owner of a company, we know how we sell. We know, like, okay, that appointment went really well. we start to ask yourself, okay, so why did it go really well? You got to ask yourself some more of those ambivalent questions like, well, we got all the contact form stuff figured out even before I went on the appointment. What was it about the appointment that made it go really well, that gave us a good outcome? And then you start to develop that ICP. And then from
Mhm.
there, like documenting at least, so the initial interaction, we need to at least get these things out of it. Okay, reverse engineer that. How do we get that? How do we get that out of that appointment? And then maybe the second interaction and the third and the fourth and ongoing in different parts of your process, documenting them in the same way. Like our goal from delivering our first pass proposal, as what we call it, is to make sure that we're delivering, X, Y, and Z in this amount of time frame, and we're getting this result out of it. The goal from that interaction with that customer is we want them to move forward. So we need to get the next appointment on the calendar. And so how do we do that? Well, here are the ways that we shape that conversation, right? Just documenting like what's your result, what's the desired result of this interaction or this part of my process, and how do we get there, right?
Absolutely. And at a certain time, all of a sudden you look around and you go, hey, I got a sales playbook for my business. And it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it
Yeah,
does have to be based on your business. The thing about Sandler and other methodologies is that you can wrap that around the things that you're already doing. And I would submit that all the things you talked about that are sort of intangible about the husband and wife working and the school district and all those things, and do they have kids and like are they going to be more apt to work with us? All those intangible things, like that goes into the pain that they're feeling around, oh my God, I've got all this stuff going on in my life and I really need this project to be done. And I need, when they come in, I need them to be respectful of, the chaos that we have going here. And I really need to get it done in this period of time. Like all that goes into their reasons for doing business with you. And it goes back to if you're the one that gets all that out of them, they're much more apt to then want to go through your process, whatever that ends up being.
right. So before I move to the next slide, because I have a couple of like quick, like little, things like little tidbits to leave. But before I get to that, one of the last things here, adaptation and pattern interrupter. So I asked you one question on a call a few weeks back. And the question was something about millennials. I asked you something along the lines of how are millennials really shaping uh, the industry? Well, maybe not our industry, but how interacting with millennials. How should we be changing our approach on our the mechanics of our sales techniques for millennials, selling to millennials differently than boomers and Gen Xers? Like, what should we be paying attention to the most there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to sort of go, well, millennials, don't have an attention span. It's like they want to do everything in short bursts and they
Watch
don't,
it now. Watch it now.
it's
It's a
easy to
good,
say
good,
those
good.
things. But I can tell you a lot of it more, it's for me is based on personality type, right? So you get to meet the person a little bit and you realize, wow, this person's very straightforward. They want it done when they want it done. They have their own ideas. I'm just here kind of guiding them, right? And that's a more dominant personality. That's someone that wants the quick burst. That's someone that wants, hey, you want to send me a text? Like it's going to come back with 3 words, right? Let's get it done.
Yeah,
Let's get it done. Like 4 words. But and then there's other people that are like, they want to consider all the data. They want to see how the rest of the family feels about it. They want to get consensus. And they're somebody that needs a lot more information. They want chapter and verse on what you're going to do for them. And they're probably going to ask you for a lot more information than you would typically give. So I would say, yes, it's easy to generalize about, particular generations of people, but I think it's much more accurate to feel like, well, how do they actually operate? How do they like to communicate? And how can I modify my style a little bit? I'm naturally somebody who is a little gregarious and likes to be, use humor and kind of disarm people a little bit. You know what? That doesn't work for everybody. Like, and you have to understand the person that's across from you, if they're being quiet, there's probably a good reason for it. They
yeah,
probably are internally just thinking about all these things. Hey, it looks like you're thinking about what I just said. Like, is there anything else I can go over for you? Maybe, back up a little bit, make sure that you feel comfortable with what we're talking about. And again, that's just calling out a thing that you're feeling in your gut.
yeah. You had mentioned one thing about the pattern interrupter earlier on this call, and the pattern interrupter for millennials. You had mentioned, it kind of surprised me a little bit. You had mentioned phone calls. Like, do the thing that nobody else is doing, right? So uh, nobody's calling people to let them know that, hey, your estimate's ready, or hey, I just see that you sent in a request online, picking up the phone and calling to do follow-ups or chase people down, informing someone of the next steps, the phone call, right?
Oh,
Are you,
absolutely.
do you think millennials
I
are
don't
picking
think
up the
that's a
phone now for
millennial.
people?
I don't think that's a millennial thing, honestly.
No?
I think it is a
All
reaction
of,
to all the technology. Like if you just think about, look, until the robots come for us, like we still have to sit across from people and have a real conversation, right? And that's what we're talking about here. Sales is it's a mutual exploration of, are we a fit to work together, right? It can't be one way. And so I just feel like that if there's an opportunity for you to kind of understand what's going on the other side of things, what easier way today than to pick up the phone, where my daughter doesn't even know her phone works. It's just, all the apps and stuff that they use. What they don't expect is for you to actually pick up the phone and go, hey, first of all, I just want to thank you for submitting that online form. I was hoping to catch you. And I know I've caught you off guard, but do you have 2 minutes to just have a quick conversation and see if it makes sense to have a meeting and kind of explore what you're trying to do? That is a total pattern interrupt because nobody expects you to do it. I
right.
was reading something online where it's like, companies send 11 or 12 emails, and I can tell you it's the case. I get emails all the time. Nobody ever calls me, and they can find my phone number in several different places. Believe me, I've Googled it. It's actually on most people's LinkedIn profile under communication to find the phone number. But that's a huge pattern interrupt in whether it's millennial or somebody else. Like nobody uses the phone anymore. And it's the most personal way, aside from sitting across from somebody, that you can actually connect with somebody. So if they give you a reason to call them, absolutely call them first.
I like that. One of the things that you touched on just a moment ago was personality styles, and I have that on here. You just explained a D and an S on the DISC assessment. I know you're a big DISC guy, and so am I. I think a lot of people on this call have already heard us talk about that in previous webinars. So just understanding the whether it's DISC or some other personality style, it sounds like that's really important to understand to develop your personalized approaches to each one of these individual customers, right? If I pick up on the fact that they're a D,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, someone who's very straightforward, we also need to be straightforward, not beat around the bush because they're not going to appreciate that as much. However, with the S's, like you mentioned, I want to get feedback from my neighbors and my friends and my family. They value collaboration, support. They want to know the next steps. They're not going to be rushed into, rapid, fast-paced, action results kind of oriented outcomes. So tailoring individual responses, right, and how we're selling to those individual people really comes into just understanding who they are as people, right?
That's it. I think sometimes we forget, like in sales, you're actually having a conversation with a person. So if you think about the person in your life who, you call them up and you have a conversation, you realize, hey, you know what? I've got to give my brother 15 minutes up front to just unload about all the stuff he's doing and the exciting things he's doing, because he's a people person and he wants to share, right? That is a personal thing that you've learned about him. Now, in a sales interaction, it shouldn't be any different. And you can pick up on these cues without knowing a whole lot about DISC or personality types or any of that stuff. But man, does it help when you walk in and you realize, wow, this person has a binder of papers that they've collected about the project that they're dreaming about, and they're dying to show it to you. And they've gotten all this, interaction with their family, and they've gotten all these, statistics, etc. Like that's where you sort of have to be um, cognizant of their style and like, hey, looks like you've done a lot of work already on this. Do you mind just taking me through that and just, showing me what you got? Well, yeah. Invite them into the process in whatever style that they use to communicate. Just try to figure out, like, if they're coming at you like a house on fire, they're probably going to be one of two styles. If they're more reserved, they're going to probably be of the two other styles. And we as humans naturally sort of adjust to people's speech patterns and the way they behave. I mean, I find myself, if I'm in a room with somebody who's an S, like I'm going a little slower. I'm a little more solicitous. I'm less out front, and in their face than I normally would be. Because if you want to effectively communicate, you've got to give them the room to do it. And recognizing the way they like to be, communicated with is a real great first step.
So good time to kind of transition a little bit to talk about formal training is not something that I ever considered as a solo owner, a solo sales guy. And now obviously we're looking into this now that we have a sales team, a team of people that are directly tied into sales around our company, how important is it for us to kind of reach out and get like formal training on sales? Now, you are a formal sales trainer, if I call you that. Um, like, how important is that for people on this call to hear like from you?
Look, obviously, I'm an advocate for methodology, just being on the same page and everybody understanding what a good deal looks like, when to pivot to a different, style in terms of communication. Like we're having conversations about with a language that we all understand. It doesn't have to be Sandler. It doesn't have to be any of these other methodologies. Like I said, it could be your own, the way that you sell as an owner, and you've reverse engineered it, and you feel like you have a system. Whatever it is, everybody should be on the same page and understand what it looks like. I mean, I think, look, Sandler is a thing that helps you whether you're in sales or whether you're not, because it really is just how do we have more effective conversations, set the right expectations, and then figure out like, are we on the same page or are we not? And give them the chance to opt in or opt out. That's really at its base what it's about. But if you're able to do that as an owner or a founder and explain that to your people, a lot of this is just cultural. Like, what
Yeah.
do we want to be as a business? Like, how do we align philosophically with our customers? Are they, you used some of those intangible things earlier. It's like, hey, if we're not on the same page with how they want to be treated, and they don't really want a white glove experience and they really just want something quick and dirty, like, is that really something we should be doing? Do we feel good about doing that? Right. So
Builds
I do
trust
think
from within the team. Yeah.
for sure, trust
When
within a
everybody can
team,
recognize it.
and everybody recognizes it. And look, think about if everybody's on the same page with the way we're operating, think about the great communication that can happen between your own staff members and how they can help each other out. If everybody's, kind of off on the reservation doing their own cowboy style that they do, that can work. But there's a lot less room for collaboration when everybody's doing their own thing. But if there's a
Yeah.
common language and a common set of steps that we take, boy, it's a lot easier for people to get better faster.
Sure. We had mentioned, and I know we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap the conversation up. But we had mentioned, at least kind of floated the idea of it, like a design build workshop, sales workshop, and something that perhaps you could host. So if anybody on the call is interested in doing something like that, obviously we haven't given much thought to how that would look, how it would operate, but certainly, Steve, if you're open to it, I mean, there's a lot of design build companies here on the call that might value kind of diving a little deeper into. I asked a lot of questions on this, and we kind of touched a little high level on some of these things, but really diving into actual sales process conversations, specifically tailored to design builds and certain. We just got one that says yes. Um, but doing some like design build workshops for for anybody on the call, I'll send a follow-up email, and if anybody's interested, just kind of raise your hand and we can figure out what that could look like. Like I said, we haven't put any definition behind it, but certainly
Absolutely.
was an intriguing idea, because if we can get a lot of design builds roundtabling in an environment where we can really look at, yeah, we're getting a couple, yeah, we're getting a couple of people, which is great. I will do some research. I'll at least ask some people for some more formal things that are maybe bothering them, or things that we want to kind of cover, and maybe we can design some sort of workshop that we could all be a part of. I would definitely get my team involved with something like that as well. So,
Love
all right, we're getting a lot of responses, so this is good.
it.
So we will definitely follow up for that. I think that would be provide a lot of value. And for those who on this call who are in some sort of roundtable, like Remodeler's Advantage or something similar, you guys know the value of like peer review. So getting in the room, somebody asks a question that you didn't even think of. It's like, oh crap, yes, it's a great question. Some of those things are really helpful. So, um, but yeah, so I'll kind of wrap the conversation up today, just to kind of say that the next two webinars we have already in place. Next week's with Logan Shinholzer from Contractor Growth Network, really talking about like maximizing content. We said about on earlier on this call, social proof, really putting a really good presentation on the front end of your company, building that social proof and maximizing your jobs that you previously completed for content that can just drive a lot of interest your way. And then Mike Valenti on the 25th, we're really going to be talking about, he has a system called Business in a Box. He has 30 some franchises now across the country, or 30 some locations across the country, and he's opening up businesses in different locations like that in a cinch. And I love his model, even though I have no aspirations to do that with Cornerstone, not yet. My team is listening, so I'm going to talk about the future case for Cornerstone in 5 or 10 years, maybe when we do have multiple locations. But I love his approach in building a business in a box because it really focuses on process and like you're systemizing your entire company down so well that if you did say, I want to open up another location, you literally hand over a playbook and say, okay, here you go. This is how we run this company over here. You go run that company over there, and you're all set. So a lot to learn from that conversation with Mike. So I hope you guys can register for both of those webinars. But kind of reaching the end of this here. If you guys have ideas for future webinars, please reach out. I'll do a follow-up. This whole session was recorded today. I'll send it as a follow-up once we get this video on YouTube. If you have suggestions for other webinars, things that may be driving concerns about your business, whether they're sales, marketing, business-related numbers, or management, leadership, anything along those lines, I'm connected with a lot of amazing people, which I absolutely love. So I can bring another expert. I don't claim to be an expert on any of these topics, but I love the fact that I can connect with the experts and bring them in and kind of convince them to join me on these webinars. So with that being said, like Steve, being the expert on sales, one last little tidbit for all of us who have lasted this long on this webinar. One last little word of advice or encouragement that you can provide us salespeople on this call.
Be a human, right? If you're feeling it, they're probably feeling it. Call it out in a nice way. Like, let them opt into your process, or figure out pretty early, you know what, we're not aligned, and it's okay. Make it okay for them to say, yeah, I'm not feeling this. This isn't for me. And make it okay for you to say the same to them, because we're not for everybody and everybody's not for us. And that pretty much covers every business, I would think.
It's all about people, right?
Right.
That's in our mission statement. I love it. So, well, Steve, I definitely appreciate your time today, kind of going through a lot of these things. I will definitely follow up on a design build workshop that perhaps we can get into the works. I think provide a lot of value, and it seems like we've gotten a dozen or so hands raised on that. So I'll follow up after this, but until then, I appreciate your time, Steve. I appreciate everyone who was on the webinar today, and look forward to my follow-up coming probably later on in the week, probably tomorrow.
Thanks again, AJ. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.